but if I was the best, I didn't need anything else. And I think that was a huge can of worms that I had to open.
Access denied. Access denied. Access denied.
Hey y'all, it's your host Jessica Jordan, and I'm here on Access Denied, the podcast dedicated to helping you get over your fear of rejection, one episode at a time. Let's go! Hey y'all, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Access Denied. I am so freaking excited because in today's episode, I am joined by Alison Van Dam, who's probably best known for her work in the podcasting industry. Allie and I jump around to several different topics of conversation, from what it's like to be a diehard Swiftie, to the pressures and rejections that come from working in the entertainment industry. It's an incredibly vulnerable episode, friends, and I cannot wait to share it with you all today. I hope you enjoy! Let's dive in! Alison! Welcome to Access Denied. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. I feel like I'm with a celebrity. The second that you asked me to do this, I was like, does she really want me to do this? And Caitlin had texted me and she was like, did you ever go on Jess's podcast? And I was like, Access Denied? Don't act like I don't know the name and follow it on Instagram.
I adore you so much. Oh my goodness. I feel like I've known of you for so long now, like through Caitlin, and you are just so cool. Every time she talks about you, our mutual friend Caitlin, y'all, who are listening, the best. Caitlin, if you're listening, you're the best. Love you dearly. But she's talked about you since truly like the first time I ever met her. And I was like, I have to meet her. I have to meet her. And we finally met. What was it? In August?
September.
It was September.
Birthday. Yeah.
Right. No, it was September. Oh. And we did karaoke for her birthday together. It was so much fun.
It was so fun. And then I discovered you were a Swiftie because I made the most niche reference I feel like possible. And I was like, God, Allie, lay off the tequila. Because I turned to you and I was like, your prosthetic is giving Reputation bodysuit like the opening number. And I was like, oh God, why did I just say that? And you were like, I'm in my rep era. And I was like,
oh my God, you did say that.
Yeah.
That was instantly, as soon as you said that, I was like, we're going to be friends. We are going to be friends.
It's black and sparkly. And I was like, all I could see was the bodysuit. And I was like, this is way too niche of a reference if she's not a Swiftie. And then I was like, perfect. It all worked out.
It all worked out. Reputation will forever go down as my favorite album too. So when you said that, I was like, oh, she gets me. She gets me.
What are your theories on like the debut rep dual album? Are we getting it? Are we getting it the Eras Tour is about to end.
It is. I think she's going to announce a release date at the end of the tour. I really feel like that is her best opportunity to do so because people are going to be tuned in to that live stream from all over the world. She's going to have so many eyes on her. And I think if she releases it like on New Year's Day, that would be iconic, but I don't think she'll do it. I think it'll come out in February if I had to guess. And I do think it's going to be a double release personally.
Yeah. I'm just like, part of me is like, I've been seeing all like the plaid things with the plaid wallpaper in the debut room of the house. And like, then she's hinting at that. And the stage itself is like the key to the vault. So I'm like, she has to unlock it and she can't leave one behind.
She can't leave one behind. I think she also kind of wants to move on from the Eras sort of genre. And I think getting this out of the way, getting both of them gone will help her like when she enters that next stage in like a year or two from now and just like completely have a clean slate. She also cares so much about ranking and award season. And I think she knows debut is just not going to perform as well as Reputation will. So by putting them together in a way, like she's guaranteeing like continued success. Yeah.
No, I agree. I guess we'll see.
We'll see. Oh my gosh, the last show's on December 8th. So prepare to clown really soon.
No, literally. We clown like every weekend. We've been clowning for the last like 3 years.
I went to one of her London shows and I was dead ass convinced that it was coming while I was there, and it did not.
Oh my gosh. I mean, like even the Paris shows with putting Tortured Poets in it, I'm like, she has given us so many just like surprises. And I feel guilty even like asking for more because we keep getting all this new stuff. And I'm like, we are being the worst. Like we are just like far too hungry for everything else she's ready to give us.
100%. Like every time that she tears us down, like in her, not in like a mean way, but just like in a way, in her music. I'm specifically thinking of I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. Like the crowd was chanting more. We do. We, in fact, do chant that all the time. And I'm so sorry, Taylor.
Yes. If Taylor is listening right now, we would just like to say we're sorry.
On behalf of the entire Swiftie community, we love you regardless of what you do. We just are excited about everything. And
exactly.
We want to be your friend. That's ultimately what it is. We just want to feel like your friend. And the more you put your stuff out there, yeah. I love that I'm just continuing to talk to Taylor Swift as if she's actually listening to this.
You never know, Jess. You never know.
That woman does be online.
She has 48 hours in each day. I'm convinced of it. There's no other way that she gets this much done.
She is probably the father of time. I'm not going to lie. Like, I would be convinced if she was father of time, Mother Nature, the Tooth Fairy. It all makes sense to me.
Yeah. I saw a meme and it was like, she's just an alien that got sent down to Earth and accidentally got famous. So now she has to stay.
I believe it. You could tell me any theory about Taylor Swift and I'm like, probably could be convinced. If I don't believe it immediately, give me a few minutes. I'll get there.
She'll be hooked. She'll be hooked.
Well, Alison, I love our little Swiftie chat, but I do want our listeners to now get to know you because you're so cool, and I want everybody to know more about your story and what you do.
Yeah. This is a weird question because I'm like, how do you intro yourself? I literally had ChatGPT write my bio when you asked me for one. But yeah, I'm Allie. I am from Minnesota. I mean, most people probably know me from the podcasting world. That's kind of what I've been doing the last several years and probably my most notable work to date. But I'm also an actor. I'm now a cycle instructor. So just kind of like living a very, I would describe it as like an LA lifestyle, like gig worker, several different projects and clients I'm working for right now, which is awesome because it's allowing me the flexibility to like do different shoots and work in the Twin Cities, which this year alone, I feel like has been like really, really good. And it's been like a nice little affirmation feeling of like, okay, like I did make the right call. Like I'm booking more than I've ever booked. Like there's just like, there are things falling into place for me, which is a very nice feeling to have.
Okay, that makes me so happy to hear. Congratulations. Because I know we're going to talk about it, but like that move from like LA to Minnesota, like is going to be a topic throughout this podcast episode today. And so I'm happy to hear that it's overall been so good. It seems like it's good based on like what I hear about you, what we've talked about, and what I see on social media. So I'm happy it is.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just like a weird, I don't know, dude. I feel like we're at a weird stage of life where, you know, half the people are like moving to new cities and trying new things. And some other people are like having multiple children and are married. And I feel like once you get out of college where everyone was kind of at the same spot, it's just a free for all now. Because it's like some people, yeah, like I said, everyone's just at different stages. So it's impossible to even like kind of gauge where you should be because everyone's quite literally doing a different thing.
100%. And, you know, like the cliches I'll say like, oh, you're not in competition with anybody. Like you're on your own journey and all that. But it can feel like really overwhelming, like watching everybody kind of like go off in different paths because it can feel like you're getting left behind, but it's just not the case. Like it really isn't. We all have our own journey and we're all doing our own thing. But I know like I can relate to that feeling as well. Like moving from London to Chicago felt like a step backwards for me in my career in many ways. And I was like scared, but it's been the best decision of my life for so many reasons. So all that to say,
that makes me happy. Each other. I love this.
Yay! Oh, this is going to be such a fun episode. I'm already smiling so much.
It's better than crying. Although, who knows? Based on where we're going, maybe there will be tears.
This is a safe space for all emotions.
Yes. Perfect. Yes. Perfect. I'll just get them all out now.
Yes. It's we're doing great. Let's ease into it a bit. I want to hear more about your experience in acting, because that was another way that we connected at Caitlin's party is you went to school at Northwestern, which is here in Chicago where I am. And so we were talking about that. But you studied musical theater, didn't you?
Yes. So that it was musical theater. So technically it was like a degree in theater. And then I was in the musical theater certificate, which is just kind of like a more niche thing. And then I have a minor in film and media studies and then an integrated marketing certificate. So when I first started out, I was going to be theater and poli-sci double major. So that's how I started. Took a bunch of poli-sci classes, and then I was hearing about like this marketing certificate that was somewhat new, and I just was like leaning more into film and media and editing anyways, which was the best part about Northwestern, I feel like, because you could really fit in a lot of things to do, and a lot of people had double majors or minors or all this extra stuff. So that was definitely one of the most attractive kind of qualities when I was looking for schools. But yeah, acting and performing like have definitely been like the main love of my life since I was little. Like I was watching Barney not like to be entertained, but like because I wanted to be the kids. Like I was like, I want to be on Barney. When I was like in middle school, like I'd started doing like theater and stuff when I was probably 6. And then like was continuing that, but like we'd go on family vacations and I'd go back to the hotel room and I was like researching agents and like what they asked for submissions. And I was like, I'm 12. But at the time I was just like very, very motivated. And I actually think that's one of the best things my parents kind of did, because neither of them are in the entertainment world. But they very much like let me handle that stuff. And in a way, you sometimes, you know, grass is always greener on the other side. You wish like I could have had a stage mom who was doing all this for me. But I'm like, actually, it proved to myself how much I wanted it, because there wasn't anybody who kind of knew what to do or was doing that research. And they were always there to like drive me to auditions and help me print my headshots or whatever. But I was very much the driving force behind that. But I think especially when you're starting at a younger age, you see so much of that like stage mom thing. And I remember like being in line for an audition and this girl behind me, like she's just fully like on her phone, like not even paying attention. And her mom's like redoing her hair and like brushing it or whatever and being like, remember, you have to have energy and you have to blah, blah, blah. And I, again, at like 13 was like, does she want this or do you want this? Because this is a little weird to me. But I'm glad that I got started when I did, because I just feel like there's so much to learn at the beginning too. Like weird, stupid things where I'm like, the first time I ever auditioned with a monologue, I stared the casting director directly in the face and like made eye contact and like spoke it to him. And he was like, so honey, like typically you don't just like stare someone down, maybe just like look above at the wall. But it's like things like that you just don't know, especially if you're not coming into it like with any sort of training. But probably when I was like 16, 17, I started auditioning for more like student films, short films here in the Twin Cities. And I feel like I just like fell in love with on-camera stuff. I'm definitely a perfectionist, so it worked a lot better for me to like try something a few different ways and have the director say, great, we got it, moving on, as opposed to, you know, coming up with a show, working on a show, and then doing that show like several times a weekend or several times in a week. And there's part of me that misses that a little bit, but I do just love like days on set, working with people, especially if you have multiple days and you can like go back and work with them. But yeah, it's just really fun. Like there's just something about being around other creative people who that's also their passion. It's just really like, it just like lights me up. And I think that's why I'm so excited with my current kind of job structure that I'm able to prioritize it as much as I do.
That's so cool. Okay, so how old exactly were you then when you went on your first like audition or something like that?
I started like more community theater stuff, like camps and stuff during the summer when I was 6. But I would say like first like formal singing monologue on my own, like 11 or 12. This was like first theater auditions. Yeah.
This has been a part of your life now for like so long. That's so cool. Because like I didn't get into the creative like industry properly until after college, like 100%. Like I did community theater or whatever, but never anything like that. That's so cool.
It is, but it's also like a little bit of a curse. Like they talk about like the acting bug, like when you get bit. And I definitely think it's like, I try to explain it to people because, you know, my mom's in finance, my dad's an engineer, my sister's a doctor. And I'm like, there is something so frustrating about like always having something in the back of your mind or on the back burner that like, you know, that's your main like love or priority, but you're not always in control of if/when it's going to happen. It's in the casting director's hands. It's in the director. Like everyone else is kind of in control of that. And then also you make your other life choices around it, whether it be moving to LA or New York or taking other part-time jobs or, you know, bartending or being in the service industry so that you have that flexibility. Like there's so many little things that have to shift in order for it to happen, but yet you wouldn't want it any other way because when you do book something, it's great. But it has been interesting, like several people I know that did musical theater with me at Northwestern have since like gone on to do other things. They've gone to law school, they've completely shifted careers, they've given up on acting. And for them, it's been a very freeing feeling. Like, I think they were ready to be done with it. But I've just like, I'm not there yet. And it still brings me so much joy. And I got a really good piece of advice like several years ago from a family friend. And they were just like, you'll keep doing it until you don't love it anymore. And I'm like, I haven't reached that point. So I guess we'll just keep going.
You know, I've been wanting to have somebody who like works in acting, like actively on the podcast since I started it. Like, because I know there's so much active rejection in the acting space. And it truly is something that like you have to build a muscle around it, I'd imagine, because it's just part of the game, right? It's part of the experience. And auditioning is half the job. That's what people always say is auditioning is half the job. Like booking things, like, yeah, you get paid for that. Like that's what the goal is. But like the audition is supposed to be fun and part of the experience as well. So I guess my question is, as somebody who's been doing this truly since you were a child, like how has it been to build that muscle? Do you feel like you have built that muscle pretty strong? Like, where are you at with that?
Yeah. I mean, I have become cold-hearted, stony-faced bitch. So it doesn't really affect me that much anymore. Just kidding. No, I would actually say I think starting like the more, whether it be commercial, industrial, film scene here prior to going to college, I felt like I was a lot more set up for success. And especially the way that like our school structure worked, all of the auditions or all of the shows that you would be auditioning for that quarter were at the same time. So it'd be like a hell week of all these like auditions, callbacks, whatever. And then the cast list would come out. And if you weren't on a cast list, the quarter had been cast. So you had to wait, 3 more months until the next audition process happened. And meanwhile, all your friends are in shows or whatever. And I think that made it harder too. And not to say that didn't like get me down often, but I think because I was going into it at that point with like a higher volume of rejection, you just get used to it faster. And I think especially with like self-tapes, it's easier to just do the tape, give it your all, and then move on. I had a coach be like, the second you walk out of an audition room, and whether it be in person or after you do your tape, rip your sides in half, throw them away. And I think like when I first started as like a teenager, I was like, I'm going to hold on to these for like the memories or whatever. And it's like, you almost have to get into the mode where you assume you're not going to get it. And it's a pleasant surprise if you do. And if you get a callback or like the next steps, I feel like that means you won in a way. And then at that point, it usually can come down to like the nitty gritty details of look or height or all this other stuff. And I think more than anything, like my goal is to like book the room or book the office specifically. Like I love working with people where even if I'm not right for a certain project, they know that I'm hardworking, that I show up on time, that I'm going to give it my all. So then like they bring me back for the next one. Like I've been so lucky to work a lot with Best Buy this year. And like they just keep bringing me back because I'm like, I am efficient. I take it seriously. But it's like that to me feels so good because I'm like, they see how hard I'm working to make their lives easier. And then we all win. But I think just the more that it happens, I think the thicker skin you get. Like any time that even like, yeah, I think auditioning, I think comments online, like any of that stuff, the first beginning of that is going to feel so much worse. It sounds terrible, but you do just kind of get used to it.
Well, you have to. Like, and that's part of loving it, I think, too. Like you get used to it because you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you would, it's a part of it. It's inherently ingrained. And so like, all right, yeah, it sucks, but we move on. Life goes on.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's just so much supply, I think, too. Like, it's just like there's so many people sending in these tapes or trying to work in these markets. It's like a numbers game at a certain point.
Yeah, that's what people say about dating and stuff.
Oh.
I feel like it's all intertwined. It's the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Just keep trying. Rejection does get easier, everyone.
It gets better. Just, I don't know, go out, like seek rejection. I kind of say that sometimes. Like I actually prefer getting hardcore rejected from a project or a date or whatever, just because I would rather know. I don't like that limbo where like some jobs or something will keep you like on the hook and they'll make you do like 50 rounds of auditions or like whatever it may be, or they'll have you like, no, mate, you're like almost there. You're almost there. Here, like do this little project, or guys will do the same thing. Like, oh, well,
It's
I'm
the
not sure yet.
breadcrumbing. It's literally
just
like corporate and emotional breadcrumbing. Yeah.
Yes, we don't need that. We don't have
No.
time for that. No, just say no. We'll move on, and that's great.
Yeah. Well, I heard somewhere, what is it? Like if everyone likes you, you're doing something wrong. Because that means like you're not being bold enough. You're not making authentic decisions. Like you're just kind of like doing everything too small. So
I like that. I like that a lot. I use tea references a lot. I have my little tea here. But I always say, like, you're not going to be everybody's cup of tea, and like that's okay. If you're being authentic to yourself, like you don't like everybody. I can think of like 5 people off the top of my head right now that I'm like, I don't get along with them, and that's okay. I don't hate them. I don't wish them ill will. We're not friends, and that's great.
yeah.
And
I think that's so much better to know than to just like, I've never been good at like the superficial fakey, whether it be like conversation or like continuing to get together with someone. Like that's maybe a flaw of mine, but I'm like, I am way too honest. It's just not going to happen.
I feel like I'm a people pleaser still, which is unfortunate, but I think I do it in the lens of like, as long as it's still giving me something in a way, it's okay. The minute that it starts being like an actual chore or something of that nature, that's when I'm like, all right, this can be done now.
Yeah.
We don't have
I like
to
that.
keep seeing each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good cutoff. If you're like dreading whether it be a date or any, yeah, it's like, no, not worth my time.
Not worth my time. The minute, like, as soon, like, you want to give people a chance. You want to like be open. I don't know. I struggle with this. These are boundaries. Boundaries are hard.
Okay, so after this episode, Jess is going to work on boundaries and Allie's going to try to warm up her frigid heart. See you next week on Access Denied.
Okay. That was brilliant. You are brilliant. That's so funny. Okay. You moved to LA after Northwestern, right?
Yes, I did.
Did you always know you wanted to go to LA?
No. So I don't know if you've picked up on this at this point, but I am a very type A planner biatch. So I was like, wow, I just try to get ahead of everything. Like I really try to push myself like to just like be the best, get everything done. So while I was in college, I was like, I'm going to do a summer internship in LA, and then I'm going to do a summer internship in New York to try to get a feel for living in both cities for like 3 months. So I know what to do after graduation. My LA summer, it was like so fun. We had this group of Northwestern people. We all sublet from UCLA people. So all of our apartments were very, very close. And it ended up where like a couple of us were in each building. So we'd like walk home from the bar late at night. Like it was just like this beautiful summer where we were all interning and, you know, working hard, but it's not the same as like a normal job. Like you're like, we're here to have fun. And we'd like go to bottomless brunch and then go to the beach and then like grab, like it was just like a beautiful, beautiful summer. And then my summer in New York was also good, but just very different vibes. And I think just based off of that, New York wasn't like my number one going out of school. I always was like, okay, I'm leaning more LA or New York because that's kind of like the big cut, you know what I mean, for theater people or people wanting to go into acting. It's like, you know, I think it very much used to be more LA, but now with all these like shows shooting in New York, it's very split. But then my senior year of college, I started working as an event planner in downtown Chicago. So by the spring, I was like almost done with all of my classes. So I dropped down to like part-time student, and then I was part-time event planner. So my dog and I would like jump on the L every couple days and like head down and like work downtown. And so they had written me up an offer for right after I graduated, and it was like decent money and good commissions. And I was like, oh shit. And I had been talking to a friend of mine who was a year older, who was already out in LA. We've been tossing around the idea of maybe living together. But when I presented that offer to her, she was like, oh my God. She was like, I would not blame you in the slightest if you stayed in Chicago and just like worked for a few years and, you know, see how that goes. So that became my plan. I was like, I'm going to stay in Chicago. And then I was getting kind of like mixed feedback too. Like I had a director the winter of my senior year. We did Legally Blonde. He was fantastic. And I was like, oh, I'm thinking about staying in Chicago. And he was just like so sassy. I loved him so much. And he was like, do you have a boyfriend? I don't want to assume, but do you have a boyfriend? And I was like, no, I don't. And he's like, honey, you have to get out to LA. Because he's like, you're going to stay here and fall in love with some Midwestern boy and get stuck. He was like, you have to go now. And I was like not really taking him seriously. And then March of 2020 happens. I move home for a 2-week spring break. Didn't we all? And I was like coming up the stairs from my room. And it was like this weird moment that I can only describe as like this like voice I heard in my head that was like, if not now, like when? Like you have to go. And so it was just that all of a sudden things kind of started falling into place. And I started doing outreach, but it didn't make like the final decision like right before I went feel that any easier. And I think it was almost like I like threw an anchor into the water and there was just like this long rope that had been like, it's like, oh, I put down a deposit for an apartment. I found someone to ship my car, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to the end and you're like being pulled out to LA. And I was like, you're not ready. But it's like, no, you are, because you put all the work into place. But I also think I just kind of jumped and didn't consider the fact that I'm like, I don't really know many people out there. And it's a pandemic and a lot of people have moved and I don't have a job lined up, but I'll figure it out when I get there. And it was just this feeling of like, I'm going to bet on me and land on my feet because I have in the past and I figure things out. So went out there and then wrapped up my job remotely, started working as a nanny, fall of 2020. So I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old who were doing Zoom preschool and Zoom kindergarten at the same time. So that was like, I was that, I'm going to be real. I don't know what movie it is when he slides with the socks.
Oh, McGuire, right?
I have no idea. I just watch Hallmark movies. But I was that. I was that man, like back and forth from iPad to iPad, being like, oh, you're in science, you're in reading. But it was great because I felt like I kind of had like that family in LA and I had like a house to go to every day and like I loved the mom and we still text and whatever. And then December of 2020 is when I got a friend of mine sent me this listing for social media work. And so I started interviewing for that and met Nick and started doing his socials. And then kind of worked my way up from there. It's been like a weird, like over the years, just like growing with Amanda and being on the show and then us going out on our own in 2023. It was just like a wild ride of learning so much. Like I feel like, I mean, I truly was like going in to run an Instagram and film silly TikToks. And now I'm like, oh, I've learned a lot. Like it's just like crazy how much goes into that kind of stuff. But truly like a great learning experience about like the ins and outs of production. And obviously just like a really cool opportunity as someone who loves to perform and act, like my day job being on a more like public platform and being on a show that people loved and loved to tune into, like was such an honor. But yeah, so that was my time in LA. It's kind of crazy in a nutshell. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many sleepless nights and tears.
It's such a whirlwind, like thinking back, like especially for that pandemic period, I feel like just it feels like a fever dream. It doesn't feel like super real for anybody. I feel like every time I bring up like pandemic times, not just on the podcast, but like in life, everybody's like, oh man, the pandemic, crazy town. And I'm like, it was in fact. And especially for you, like having all of these changes within that time period too, like new place, a new job, everything. And it's intense. That's so cool. And the way that podcasting kind of like, and like being in the podcast industry, like found you that's such an interest. I didn't know that part of your story. But so it started like you were looking at social media work, right? Like that's like what you just said. So why social media? Like what was drawing you to that at the time?
I think I was looking for a variety of jobs. Like I looked at a lot of like assistant work, video editing stuff. Like throughout that fall, I was doing random gig work for like, I was working for like Harvard Business School and like Harvard Law School and like editing videos for them. Just like anything I could like try and, say yes to. And a lot of it I didn't have an experience in before, but I was like, I am going to figure it out. And so I'd been interviewing for a variety of things. Like I interviewed for Bosma. She's now going to be on Beverly Hills, but at the time she was the CMO of Netflix. So I interviewed to like be her assistant. So I was kind of like all over the place. But I knew I wanted to do something more like in the entertainment sphere. So like the opportunity to like work my way up to being on the show and like working in a more like production area was so exciting to me because I was like, there's no other opportunity like this to like not only do things behind the scenes, but like hopefully one day be in front of the camera. So that really like I think set it apart for me.
And like podcasting was still, I feel like at that point, like just sort of taking off in a way, like in that pandemic era. Like I remember listening to podcasts in like 2018, 2019 a little bit, but I feel like it really ramped up like right around the pandemic. And so what was it like kind of being on the precipice of that like explosion in a way?
Yeah. By the time Amanda and I got there, I think they'd been going for a year, maybe two. So they were very much like ahead of their time, which I think helped us in the long term because we just like had momentum coming behind us. But it was really cool. And I think there's still, now I think it's definitely exploded. It's very, very saturated, but I think it's always funny. Like anytime I'd be flying back home or something like that, you get chatting to people on planes. They're like, oh, what do you do? Why are you out in LA? And I would say I produce a podcast. This is like later on once I was actually the producer. But I was like, oh, I produce a podcast. And then everyone's follow-up question is that a full-time job? They'd be like, how is that a full-time job? But I was like, one, it is. And two, we do a lot of shows. But it's like, it was always so funny because like, I don't think a lot of people know all of the stuff that goes into like the prep, the post, like even being on the shows. Like I'm like, yes, it is like, long story short, it is a full-time job. Especially when we like went out on our own and we're doing everything in-house. But yeah, I think it is funny, like the different, almost the different like ages and how they react to someone like working in podcasting or having a podcast. Because I do think it's the older generations are like, so you sit and talk, and it's like the younger version, like generations that are like, oh, like call her daddy and like all these like huge big shows. Like they know what they, take to produce.
100%. And the podcast you were on was, I listened to it. Like I've listened to it for years or whatever. And like, I remember it was one of the first big production podcasts that I listened to because most at that point were even just audio based only and like adding video to it and everything. Like that's still very new. I feel like a lot of podcasts still don't really take that element into account. And so it's just so interesting. Like, I feel like you got in it at such an interesting period. And like, that's so exciting for you. What a fun way to like be in LA too.
Yeah, no, it was really fun too. And I think that's also like, which I'm sure we'll get into too, like you almost like you drank the Kool-Aid a little bit because you're like, I'm living in LA and I'm doing what everyone wants to do and I'm working in entertainment. Maybe not everyone wants to do, that's presumptuous, but like I have a cool job and I live in a cool city. And so when I show up to the Christmas party, everyone's gonna say that I'm so fun and cool and successful. But yeah, so it's like you almost like you can fall for the storyline sometimes even more than what like your day to day looks like.
100%. And like as somebody who is in like the influencer space or whatever, like I get a lot of pressure to move to LA. Like I've always like kind of had that. Even when I was living in London, I would have conversations with my manager and she'd be like, LA, are you and your partner going to move to LA? And I'm like, probably not. But when I came back to the States, I was like, maybe I should do that. I obviously didn't. I'm in Chicago. I do think that was the right choice for the time, but I do think that there is a certain Kool-Aid to that environment and to the creative entertainment industries in general. I think that as a whole, there's a lot going on behind the scenes.
For sure. Yeah. And it's because it's a lot of like hustling and grinding, right? Like whether you're in LA or New York, rent is so expensive. Everyone's running around crazy. A lot of the people, especially who are moving out there, like right after college, they're working as assistants and doing all these crazy hours. Like it almost, I think what frustrated me was like, it became the suffering Olympics at a certain point of like, oh, you're done with work. I wish I was done with work. I worked until 11 and like I had to do like, and I'm like, but we shouldn't be almost like competing or bragging about that. Like that's, and I'm not trying to say like, don't work hard and hustle for your dreams, but it just felt like it was like, sometimes you got caught in like this negativity and you're like, okay, but let's maybe just not. We can talk about other things. But I do think like in entertainment, especially, it's like it can be low pay, long hours, but like everyone's there like to hustle and grind and, chase a dream. And I think too, I was talking to a friend in New York when I was there a couple times ago. And she was like, I wonder if someone's going to do a study at some point of people who have worked in entertainment and how much their parents helped them for rent. because like, especially when you're 22, right out of school, which in itself is like such a effed up system, because then I'm like, how is the person who's just paying for everything themselves supposed to be successful? But at a certain point, you burn out or your savings dry up. And I'm like, we need to figure out why we're asking people to work for so little for so many hours.
Yeah, that's a great thing that you just said there, because I had an assistant when I lived in London for a while, and her and I would talk about this all the time. Like, how many of these other influencers, like we would be at like an influencer event or whatever, are getting help, are not paying for things on their own, are either like with a partner that's like footing the bill. Like, I'll be transparent. Like, I lived in a very cushy lifestyle in London because my partner's job provided housing. We didn't have to worry about rent. That takes out a huge fear right there. Like, having a place to live and not be worried about that month to month, day to day, hour to hour takes a lot of pressure off. So it just like makes you wonder a little bit, like, who else is like kind of having that help, because it does make a difference. And I like, now I put the bill for my rent, I'm a lot more stressed. I can tell you that. It's a lot scarier.
No, for sure. Yeah.
It sounds like you had a really fun time in LA, but obviously you're not there anymore. What was like that decision like, especially as somebody moving? You're in Minnesota now, like not historically considered to be a huge hub for entertainment. So I'm just curious, like what that trajectory was like.
I think like looking back, again, it's like the Kool-Aid, it's the headline sentence. And I think overall, like, I was not myself anymore. Like, I think it like just really took it out of me. I wasn't like really living. I felt like I was just surviving. And yeah, it's like, it's hard when you do have those like cocktail hour conversations and people are like, that's so impressive, that's great. I loved going to family reunions because my cousins were like, oh my God, this is our cousin. She lives in LA and she's so cool and she has this amazing job. So it's like, I was like grasping on to moments like that to like feed myself. But no one saw like the nights where I was like crying in my apartment by myself, or like the time where I couldn't stand up off my floor because I hadn't eaten in days. Like, there's just like a lot of really rough times. I would probably say like starting like 18 months ago, it just like really took a turn. Not this past summer, but the summer before was really tough. So by the time it was like Labor Day of last year, so of 2023, I was just like, I was crying to my mom and I was like, I'm trying to find an Airbnb for Labor Day for me to go to by myself to try to do something to like get me out of this funk, but I have no one to go with and all this other stuff. And she flew me home, which was really good. I got to see Caitlin. I went to Chicago for like a night, and it was like, I think it was during that trip that a family friend of mine was like, I saw this job posting. It made me think of you. Like, you'd be amazing. And she was reading it off. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. But it was here. And I just had like such a resistance even at that point. Like, I was like, no, what are people going to say if I like come back here? They're going to think I failed. They're going to say she couldn't hack it and she came home. Because I'm like, I've always been the person who's just like trying to push to the next level. I went to a high school not knowing anyone. I then went to Northwestern. I moved to LA during the pandemic. And it's like, while those were all decisions I wanted to make, I definitely like got off on the idea that they were cool things to do. I got off on the idea that I was impressive and doing things that other people weren't. And so I'm like, but I'm always the girl who's doing something more and who's excelling and who's the best. And I was working with a therapist this past summer and she was like, we were trying to work on like qualities and things I believed in myself. And I was like, but if I was the best, I didn't need anything else. And I think that was a huge can of worms that I had to open. So last fall, I think, and it was similar to like me moving out to LA, like I was calling my mom crying because I was like, this isn't the right decision. How am I supposed to tell them that I'm going to move back to Minnesota? And at that point, I truly didn't even really know. I just knew I needed a change. And she was like, no, like this has been happening for a long time. Like it was the rope that had been like unwinding, but it just felt really sudden at the end. And so it felt like a breakup in a way where you're like, I think this is the right call, but I truly won't know until like 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years down the line. And, you know, Caitlin said something beautiful to me. She was like, nothing is permanent. You can always move back. If something's like really, if it doesn't feel right, you could try a new city. You could go straight back. She's like, for all people need to know, it's like, oh, I went back to like spend some time with family, missed LA. Here, I'm back again. Like, they're truly like, everyone's so focused on their own shit that it's left nothing is permanent in that way, which is a beautiful kind of like safety net to have. So I moved home in November, like somewhat reluctantly, and I kept my apartment there. I kept my car there. Like, everything was still waiting for me because I'm like, I could change my mind and then nothing has to change. And within like 2 weeks of being here, like I felt so much more myself. It's still like, I think now I'm getting back to her, but like my mom even said, she was like, the weight that has been lifted off of you in the last 2 weeks. Like, and it was like like, it was funny. It was like within 3 weeks, it was Thanksgiving. I emailed my apartment building, again, putting all the pieces into place. I'm like, I'm moving out this date. I found someone to ship my car. I went back out to LA in early December, and in 3 days while working full time, moved my entire apartment out, sold everything. Thank God for like Genevieve and Amanda who came over and were like Genevieve went through my closet. She's like, these 3 dresses look the same. I'm throwing these 2 away. Like, she was so, Amanda's like folding up my like blankets and pillows and like taking my Spectrum thing to the post office. Like, I'm like, thank God. But it happened so fast. And then, you know, I like saying goodbye to like the people I had there. It was like very interesting always to kind of see like how things end, especially like the relationships where you're like, I don't know, you know, of like how people act. Like, are we going to be long distance friends, or is this kind of where we finish things? And there was a mixture of both, I think. And yeah, I flew home. I was, you know, crying. It was a breakup. Crying, came back, and then obviously like kept working remotely for several months. So kind of got that same piece of it for a bit, and then kind of wrapped up my whole kind of like chapter, that LA chapter, on May 31st. And I think since then, and that's what I'm trying to give myself credit for, because I'm like, I've been back for a year, but it's really been more like 6 months since like everything has come to a close. And that's, I think, where I'm still trying to kind of like heal, put things back together, get back to myself, and like thank God for my family, like for them dealing with me and putting up with all this stuff. And like there's just been so much, I think, brought up as I look for new career options or even speak to people, of like how changed I was, and not in a good way, from that experience. Like, I was working with a career coach and she's like, oh, so you do this and you're an expert at this and you blah blah blah. I'm like, no, I'm not. I was like, I don't think I can do that. I don't like, I was like, very confident person with or without tequila. Like, where the fuck did that go? But I'm like, I didn't have that anymore. And that's when I was working with a therapist over the summer, just like during this transition period, which is one of the smartest things I did, because I like started meeting with her like a week or two beforehand. And I was like, I'm about to go through a big shift. And I thought maybe I could use a life preserver. And that's when we kind of started talking about like self-esteem versus self-worth. And I think as someone who liked to have the title and the success and be, you know, thought of as like a cool person that people want to be in a fun, exciting life in LA, like I lived for like that validation and for people being happy with me and telling me I did a good job. And without that, I was like, what do I have? I think I had to realize that like I would rather I'm saying this now and I'm like, do I even fully believe this? But I'm trying to. I would rather go to a Christmas party this year and say, I'm really happy and I'm really glad that I moved home and I'm a much better person in a much better place, than 2 years ago telling people that I was living in LA and thriving when I wasn't.
You've just been so vulnerable, and I want to thank you so much for that, because genuinely, I think you've said so many important nuggets of wisdom. The self-esteem versus self-worth thing is a huge one, especially with the way our society is right now, being so public with social media and whatnot. You think people have all these opinions of you, and they might not. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But like it really, taking other people's thoughts into account, that's a form of self-rejection. Like this is a podcast about rejection and being told no. Like, you're denying yourself true joy because you're so concerned about how people are perceiving you, what your image is, what your personal brand is, if you will. People love to say that in ours.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. And working through that, and I can totally relate to so much of what you said myself for various reasons. And I love that you said at the end there too, like, I don't know if I even fully believe this yet, but I want to. And, you know, that's something my therapist will always talk to me about as well. She's always like flagging for me, like the shoulds, but she's like, but saying want, that's different. That's something that it's not like coming with shame. It's coming from like deep inside. I want this. This is what I desire. And I can hear like that shift in what you're saying. And it's so powerful. And something else I want to flag too is when you were talking about moving to LA, you said, oh, well, I was nervous about it, but I just had to bet on myself. And that comes from a place of like self-worth, right? Because ultimately we all only really have ourselves at the end of the day. Like, yeah, we can get into relation with others. Yeah, we have family and friends and all of that. And support systems are great, but we have ourselves to lean on. And that you have to have some level of self-worth. And to have that much fear and anxiety and emotions surrounding like a move to Minnesota then, and not having that same mentality, it wasn't like, I can hear the shift. That was a shift. And I'm so thrilled that it's starting to like shift back for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the little things too. Like, I think reminding yourself, because even like thinking about, you know, us getting together today and like thinking about, oh, we're going to be talking about this, like there are still fears. Like I go to New York every year. I guarantee when I go to New York, I'm going to have to explain to my New Yorker friends why I'm not in New York, because it's like, it's just a different thing. They don't understand why I would go to the Midwest, but I'm like, it's these little things of like, I hated Sundays because there was always a goodbye. Like there was always brunch and then the airport. And now I can go to brunch and go home. Like there's just like these little things. Like my sister moved back. We've never lived in the same city since she went to Notre Dame. And I'm like, these are like these little things where it's like, it's just by being like grateful and trying to flag those for myself. I'm like, no, so this is why I'm here right now. It might not be like the flashiest, coolest headline, but like, again, are we going to value the flashy, cool headlines and like the twice a year Christmas party and family reunion? Or are we going to value like the day to day?
We're going to value the day to day, how we feel, and really focusing on emotional and physical well-being. And I admire that so much in you, especially having been in a like public space. Like that was discussed publicly. That can't not like that almost validates your fears in a really unhealthy way because you did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong.
It's weird when people, and it's like we all do it, right? Like you and I started this episode by talking about Taylor Swift. It's weird when people you've never met have like such strong opinions, or even people you have met. Like there have been plenty of like comments and jokes and things that like didn't land well with me. But like, I mean, talk about like, should we bring up the R word? Reddit? Like, I'm like, that's a crazy place. And I'm like, it's wild.
In some ways, I hate to even say this, but like, it's got to make you feel like good. Like people care, right? Like everybody wants to be accepted, be cared for. But at the same time, like when it has that negative bit, like why, what is there? Like it's that, what do they call it? I've said it on the podcast before. It's when you don't actually know somebody, but like you pretend that you do, like me with Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like that parasocial relationship. That's it. That's what it is. I'm very proud of you. I'm proud of you for doing what was best for you, because at the end of the day, we only have one life. And not to, again, I always feel like I throw around all these cliches all the time and all these like big generalizations, but we do only have one life, and like we have to do it for ourselves. We have to live it for ourselves, and to worry about how other people are going to view something. No, like you have to be okay and content with who you are at the end of the night and where you're at, because it's so like physical, mental, spiritual, all those health things, that wellness, it's so important.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's like, what do you want to look back on? Like, you're going to look back on the day-to-days, hopefully. And like, although they might blur together, like, were you happy? And I think that was like a big thing. I did a vision board for the first time in my life, like on New Year's Day of this year. And there was just like several photos of like little kids, or even just like women just like laughing and like heads leaning back. And it's just like, to have fun and to laugh. And I'm like, I am excited, and I think I am getting back to that point. And I even try to, like, again, it's the flagging and the gratitude of just like keeping that going, where I'm like, this is good. This wasn't always here. So let's embrace and enjoy it.
You know, this was reminding me of a conversation I actually had with my therapist. I think it was like end of the spring of this year. So it wasn't even that long ago. But I was telling her, I was like, I feel like I'm a failure in Chicago. Like nothing is happening. Like I work is slow. Nothing is going right. I was so much happier in London. Like everything was so great in London. I was doing this and I was going here and I was having this. And like, yeah, I had a crappy relationship, but everything else was perfect. And she's like, actually, let me pull out my notes, because they in fact were not. You were not happy there either. She's like, apparently, according to you, at the top of your career, you had this going wrong. You had this going wrong. This was stressing you out. You were anxious about this. And I was like, oh, God, what an important reminder. What an important thing to focus on.
And I feel like if I were to like give anybody a piece of advice, if I could like go back and like give myself some advice, it would be to write more stuff down. Because it's like, you know, I have like a journal that I'll, you know, write stuff in every now and again. But even like, I just need to get back in the habit of it, because even like, decisions I made in October, I randomly had written something down in July and I was like, oh, holy shit, I was feeling that way 3 months ago. Now I can feel more grounded in this decision. But it's like, I almost wish I'd done, and I have some from my time in LA, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But like, I'm like, you need that, whether if you don't have a therapist or like sometimes like some really good friends like hold the mirror up. Sometimes it's nice to just like go back to the source and be like, oh, wait. And exactly what you said, like it's easy in hindsight to go back and be like rose-colored glasses, and even like me recounting to you of like, and then I did this, and then I blah, blah, and you're like, oh my God, you had a fabulous time. And I was like, but it's like, it's so easy to be just like, oh, everything's perfect in a little bubbly Glinda bubble, and like, we'll be fine.
Oh, yes. Wait, speaking of Glinda, I will be seeing Wicked tonight. We're filming this like the week that Wicked is coming out, and I'm so excited.
I'm so excited. I'm seeing it on Sunday. I can't wait.
Oh my God. We'll have to talk about our thoughts and feelings for sure. But I'm also noticing the time, and we've already been talking for an hour, which is wild. So freaking crazy. This I feel like it's hardly been any time at all, and I think I still had like 2 other like things. But you know what? We're gonna table this conversation, but we are gonna go into the fast round questions really quick.
Okay, great. All right.
So, Allie.
Yes.
When you're feeling sad or upset or whatever, what is a song that can immediately kind of maybe not turn your mood around, but make you feel a little bit better?
Right now, I've been listening to Juno by Sabrina Carpenter.
Excellent.
Like, I literally the other night got up on the counter for my dogs, and I was like, have you ever tried this one? And I just pretend like I'm on the Short and Sweet tour, and it's been doing the trick.
Oh my God, that's iconic. You're the first person to say a Sabrina Carpenter song, so congrats on that.
I'm sticking with my brand of the basic white bitch.
She's killing it right now, though. She's
thriving.
Like everywhere. I love her. She's so great. I didn't get to go to her tour. Did you get to go to her tour?
I didn't. I'm just watching it on TikTok.
Me as well.
Every single clip.
She just arrested Marcello from...
I saw that. Yes.
SNL.
Yes.
Might have been the best pop culture moment of the year. I'm not going to lie to you.
Domingo? Talk about someone who's taking off. Domingo.
I need like 50 more Domingo storylines. Like that just needs to be a recurring thing, a recurring bit for sure.
Agreed. Yeah. Strike, weekend update, put in Domingo.
Period. Up next on my little questions, what is something that you have in your rejection rescue kit? So when you faced a big no, what's something that you do or have or use to kind of lift your spirits again?
Probably my family group chat, honestly. Like we're very close. We talk about everything. My dog has been honestly a lifesaver. I got her in college, and I truly don't know if I would be here without her. So probably those, I mean, they're not like physical, tangible items that someone could order on Amazon, but for me anyways.
Hey, no, that's why I ask it kind of that way. Because for some people, it's been like a food item like ice cream or something like that. And for other people, they took like an angry stomp around their neighborhood and like different things like that. So I love these. Nobody said a family group chat yet. And I think that is like so great because it is kind of like you get all the personalities in there and it can really be healing in many different ways.
Exactly.
Next question. What is the last thing that you did scared?
I bought a condo on Monday.
Congratulations. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. That's huge.
So, I know. Talk about like literally I had a professor in college who gave us a piece of advice for musical theater auditions. And he just said, go before you're ready. And it had more to do with like, especially if you're learning like a dance or you're doing it across the floor, like don't wait and overthink it and be in the final group. Just like go before you're ready. And I feel like sometimes in life, you just got to go before you're ready. And especially someone like me who loves to live in my brain, it's never going to feel 100% right. But, and especially I'm like, it comes down to those fears where I'm like, do I want to be in Minnesota for like several years? But I'm like, we're going before we're ready. We're allowing the anchor into the water and we will see.
You'll see. And again, nothing's permanent. You can always figure it out. If it's not where you want to be in 2 years' time or whatever, you can put it on Airbnb. You can sublet it. You can sell it. Whatever you want to do. The world is your oyster. You'll figure it out.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you.
You're welcome. No, I love that. Congratulations. That's really exciting.
Thank
you. Of course. Final question for you. What is a last piece of advice, nugget of wisdom? You've given us so many, but what is that last thing that you would tell people before we leave the call today or leave the recording today?
Kind of piggybacking off of like the journaling thing, like just like spend more time writing things down, or even like if you want to like record a video. Like I found a time capsule video I made after a breakup like 2 years ago, and like the thoughts to my future self, which is really cheesy to record and a little awkward to watch back sometimes, but like try to put the self-judgment aside and be like, oh no, like you only have one you, like we only have one life, like you are you. So I'm like, I also think in addition to that, like check in with yourself, take care of yourself, write things down so that you have more of like a record of that and you can make better decisions. But I also think like make your brain a really comfortable space to just hang out in. And I think like oftentimes like people struggle to, be alone, or they always like want to be thinking or doing something. And I'm like, maybe this is a me thing, but I'm like, I love spending time with myself. And like, ideally, I feel like that's where you want to be, where it's like, if something doesn't work out or there is a breakup or you end up single again, like just whether it's through therapy or meditation or journaling, like having those open dialogues and like taking care of yourself inside and out. So like, you've got you can bet on you and ideally land on your feet. And then also if shit hits the fan, that's when you reach out to people and you lean on the people in your corner, because we can't always do things by ourselves. But I think, just spending more time getting to know you, because that's what I'm doing right now.
Oh, that was the perfect final nugget of wisdom. Allie, thank you so, so much for coming on Access Denied and like, being so open and vulnerable. You've shared so much of yourself today and been so, so great. I hope people listening have found some relatability and some connection with you, because I know I have. I am so glad that we had this chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. It was so lovely, and you create such like a warm and gracious space. And so anyone would be lucky to come on your show and have a little chat with you. It literally feels like we just started.
I know. I can't believe it's over an hour. Like I keep looking at, I'm like, oh my gosh, how is time flying? But can you tell everybody listening where they can find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Alison.Vandam, Vandam. I have a website, but it's just mostly like acting stuff, so I don't think you need to go there. But yeah, hang out with me on Insta.
Alison Vandam, she looks good. That's exactly what you put.
Don't. I mean, you were like pronunciation of your name, and I was like, I don't know what to put here.
You're not the only person that has said something somewhat similar to that, like next to their name. And every time I'm like, the people that I've had on are so cool. I'm just so grateful. And like, it's so nice to like be friends with so many epic all-stars of human beings. So
yes.
Thanks
okay. Well, I'm excited to come back to Chicago. I'm excited to see you in person again. I will see you during our next book club. So at least I got to see you virtually.
Cannot wait. It's going to be great. Thank you so much for being here. Everybody that's listening, you can find Allie's stuff down in the show notes, and I will see y'all next week. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Access Denied. New episodes launch every Tuesday, so I hope that you will subscribe, download, whatever you do to make sure you're here every single week. We have so many incredible guests coming on, and I want to say a huge shout out to JP Wonder Sound for dropping this sick beat that you're listening to right now. Thanks to everybody who made Access Denied possible, and I will see you next time. Bye!